Hi, my name is Kayleen, and I'm the Pilates mechanic here in the BB Garage. I'm here with Joe.
Senior sales technician here at Balanced Body.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about your studio reformer maintenance. So this applies to machines with both Infinity foot bars, right, and Revo spring bars. Yep.
Revo foot bars and spring bars.
Revo foot bars and spring bars, yes. So we're going to first go over a little quick schedule about how often you should maintain each part of your machine, and then we'll go over in detail about all the little things that we should check for safety, okay? So the first thing, Joe, is we want to keep track of things in a maintenance log.
Well, there's this maintenance log that Balanced Body sells.
Balanced Body does sell it, yes.
The equipment maintenance log. It's very handy, and it covers everything that a studio would need to maintain their equipment and keep a good tracking of everything.
Yeah. So there's lots of checklists and things like that in there for each piece of your equipment. But of course, if you don't want to use that one, you can also use an Excel sheet or a notebook, just so that when years go by, you remember what you did to each machine. Okay?
Yes.
So after every client, we need to wipe the upholstery.
That is correct. And using BB Clean is the approved product, or mild soap and water. We found that using other harsh chemicals can actually cause the vinyl to crack or split.
Yes.
So just a quick spray down is all it really takes, especially in the areas where
Skin touches.
Thank you.
Yes. Lotions, skin
And
oil
on the foot bar.
will all start to leave little remnants on your vinyl.
And there we are.
Okay. So that's between each client. Now, our next frequency is every week. There are only a couple things we want to do every week. One of them is my super favorite, wiping the rails and the wheels.
And that can be done with just a dry cloth.
Yep.
Easy enough just to get in here, wipe your rails down. Gets all the dust and dirt off, as you see.
Yes.
And then for the wheels, I have found if you just take your rag and hold up against them.
So Joe's unhooked the springs here so that the carriage moves really smoothly. And he's holding the rag up against the surface of the wheel, because you can wipe the rails all day long, but if there's gunk on the wheels,
It'll transfer
it'll
to
transfer.
the track. Yes.
So what this does is it prevents hair and dirt and dust from getting caught up in the wheels and into the bearings.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that way your wheels will get a longer life.
Yep.
Usually just a dry rag will suffice. We found that using some chemicals can cause the wheels to degrade faster. So like I say, just a dry rag.
Yep, my rule of thumb is if you need a little bit more power, get it wet with some water.
Yeah, very good.
Yep. Okay, so that's your weekly checklist. Your monthly checklist is a little bit longer, and this is where we get more into the safety of your equipment. Okay, so the first thing we want to do every month is check your springs. Yes. So what are we looking for on these springs, Joe?
Well, we have 3 prime examples of some issues. First one I like to always show is a simple distortion between the springs. You'll see where the coils are offset. As you spread it, you'll see they start separating there earlier. That is a sign of a bad spring. I definitely recommend being replaced. Somebody will get injured. Second example is a spring with a distorted end. That's caused by generally when a carriage is extended and somebody's foot slips off the foot bar and it slams back in. You'll find that it'll pop the ends like this. This also will break at the worst opportune time. I do recommend replacing it. And on this spring, you'll see the coils are a little offset. There's a wave to them. And that is a sign of spring wearing out. And I did notice on this one also, the clips are starting to wear. So on these clips, when they start wearing grooves into them, this is a weaker point and it will break, so a good time to replace your springs. I recommend checking them all at the same time, make sure that they don't have any grooves like that. Now, one thing that we do want to mention is this spring is attached under the carriage, this hook. To really inspect your springs fully, you want to take and not just look at the springs here, but you actually want to take your carriage disconnect the spring, slide it up towards the riser end of the machine, and lift it up carefully. And you can actually view your springs pretty quick and easily. See they all look good. Set your carriage back in carefully. Hook up a spring to make sure the carriage doesn't get out of control, and good to go.
Super easy. Awesome. So we will also, so springs are like the most obvious safety check that we want to do. But there are a bunch of other things that we
Sure.
need to check. So in general, we also want to check that nuts and bolts
Correct.
are not loose. Now, I'm not going to say tight because
No.
Joe, we were just talking
Yeah.
about this. Yeah, what's your
There-
opinion on that?
There's no need to over tighten a bolt. If you walk up to a bolt like the foot bar bolt, you wiggle, it doesn't move with your hand, it's pretty secure, no need to get your wrench out and tighten it. What you'll find is you start tightening a bolt and keep tightening it and keep tightening it, you'll strip the threads on it or strip the threads on the plate that it's attached to. Then you're going to run into more expense because you're going to have to replace a part that didn't really need to be replaced if you just did the basic check.
Yep. So besides nuts and bolts, we also want to check our upholstered parts. We want to check the stitching to make sure that nothing's frayed or going to break. We
Correct.
want to check the ropes,
Yep.
right? And then every quarter, which these are the quarterly tips here are mostly for longevity here.
Sure.
We want to rotate the springs.
Yes.
So what are we going to do for that?
Well, let's explain why you want to rotate the springs.
Yes.
And we're talking about rotating springs of like colors.
Yes.
So generally you have a client will be sitting on a carriage and you instruct them to adjust a spring. You want to hook up a red spring, for example. Most machines have 2 or 3 red springs. First thing they do is always reach down to the right-hand spring and hook it up because most people are right-handed. What happens is you're putting more wear on that right-hand spring and the other 2 are getting less wear. So you come to find out that red spring's starting to get weaker. You're thinking, wow, that's the only weak spring I have. Why is that? Well, if you go quarterly, unhook the spring from under the carriage, move it to a different position, and move the other 2 red springs, you'll find you get equal wear out of them, and you'll get full life out of all your springs. And when you replace all your springs, it's much better to do it all at once instead of trying to remember which spring you replaced when.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you can also wash your cotton loops. Now there's some specific instructions for this. What
Yeah.
are they?
Well, first of all, you want to disconnect them. And I tell people there's 2 ways you can wash them. First of all, you can put them in a washing machine. It's a little more aggressive, but you must use mild laundry soaps, such as what you'd use with children's clothing. Woolite's another one. Or me personally, I hand wash them in the sink with some mild soap, dry them off, rinse them off, dry them off, let them hang to dry completely.
So no dryer.
It can be done, but if you put them in the dryer, it will create little fuzz balls on them.
Yep.
I've had people put them in pillowcases and dry them. I still find hanging them overnight, letting them dry is the most efficient way.
Cool, cool. All right, so we're going to go through your wooden reformer with an Infinity foot bar or a Revo foot bar spring bar, bit by bit to show you which parts you need to check to make sure they are secure and they're not worn. Okay?
Yeah.
So let's start at the foot bar over here. Now, this is an Infinity foot bar. And the first thing, and this actually applies to all of the foot bars, we want to check the padding.
Yep.
Right?
Right where your feet wear.
Yeah, so typically I will see a studio have 2 really bare spots
Right about here and here.
where feet go during footwork. So you just run your hand over like
Yeah.
Joe did, and
And
you'll
if-
feel them.
And if you feel some really significant divots, it's time to change that pad. And it's not really that difficult of a process, but you'll find your clients really enjoy it much more.
Yep. The other thing you want to check on your foot bar padding is that the Velcro is on the opposite side of someone's foot, and that the strings that tighten the edges of the foot bar cover are tucked away, so you can't see
Yep,
them.
exactly.
Specific to the Infinity foot bar, we need to make sure to clean the tracks they slide on so
Yep.
that the foot bar slides easily, right?
Pretty simple. Cloth right here in this track, wipe it down. That way, your foot bar is going to slide nice and easy.
Yes.
If you do find that it's not sliding real well, a little bit of silicone spray goes a long ways. I'd spray some right in this track on
Yep.
both sides, adjust the foot bar back and forth, and you'll find that it really slides nice and easy.
Yep. If you haven't done that in a while and you've got a bunch of junk built up in the tracks though, get all the dirty junk out
Yeah,
before you start spraying
I agree.
silicone, okay? Two other things we want to check on the Infinity Foot Bar.
Well, you have your plunger levers, and what you'll find on these plunger levers, that this screw right here can come loose. Well, quick way to find out is when you squeeze the handle, you'll see there's a little bit of a tip of the pin that locks the foot bar in place sticking out. That's okay. If you squeeze it and there's a lot of the tip of that pin sticking out, generally the screw's loose on the handle. What you'll notice on a close-up shot on this is the spring will be compressed slightly. That's correct. If the spring's extended real wide, the handle is coming loose and you don't want it to fall off, so you want to make sure and tighten that back down.
Yep. The other thing are the pivot bolts.
That's
okay?
correct, but that would be on the Revo.
I'm talking about this one.
The main pivot ball.
Yeah.
Make sure those are tight.
Yes.
Just like I showed before.
Yes.
As long as you twist with your hands,
Yep.
they're tight.
Hand tight is good.
And also check your plunger knobs. Make sure
Yes.
that some of the older versions had a thread-on knob. Make sure that knob just doesn't unscrew,
Yep,
because
so
people
you-
tend to lose those.
You could easily righty-tighty
Lefty-loosey.
to tighten them up.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm going through my checklist here. If we shift over to our Revo system, okay, we want to check similar things. So first we're going to check the bolts at the pivot points.
Which will be these bolts down here. There's two nuts. There's a actual regular hex nut and then an acorn nut up against it, which is designed to lock the hex nut in place. You'd hold the inner nut. If it is loose, tighten the outer nut up against it, cinches it in place. It's very important to make sure that the pivot bolt on the main foot bar doesn't come loose.
Yes.
Then the next one we want to check is the support bar. So as the support bar swings, it has a tendency over time these nuts can come loose. So you'll hold the Allen bolt on this side, slightly tighten this so the threads are about flush with the end. It should be fine.
So these nuts, these particular ones have some nylock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a little rubber gasket.
It's actually a little plastic ring in there, and
Yeah.
they're designed for to stop bolts from vibrating loose or nuts from vibrating loose. So when they're put on, you have to tighten it and engage into that plastic. When it's engaging into that plastic, that's what's actually locking the nut on so it doesn't vibrate loose.
Good. So make sure that the nylock is actually touching the threads of the bolt.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Very important.
On your foot bar, your Revo foot bar, I often go into studios where you'll see they're missing one or both of the slide lock. So the slide locks are these little plastic pieces that will slide along the side of the foot bar support so that when you pull on the actual foot bar, it doesn't come flying out of the support, okay? So it's really important for safety to have both of those, both of those
Yeah.
present, right?
That's correct.
The other thing, when we're looking down here into the well, we want to check a few things. First, you want to check and make sure that your rubber bumpers are present and not cracked. If they're missing, you can easily get replacements for Balance Body.
That is correct. And also, we want to make sure those handles are nice and tight.
Yes, these handles here should not be wiggly and loose. Moving up the spring bar, we're checking all of these eye bolts to make sure that they have the black rubber caps and that the eye bolts are not bent. Now, to check the function of your Revo spring bar, you're going to grab onto this silver handle. Make sure that at least one spring is on. I've got all of them on here. Lift the handle, slide the carriage, and then put the handle all the way down. So now we've adjusted the position of the spring bar. We've got some room here to look at our foot strap. We're going to give the foot strap a little tug, make sure that everything is secure. And it's really important here to see that the clips are facing out, away from where someone's feet might be. We see the jump board bracket down here, but we also see the knobs
On the,
on the
backside.
front side, okay? So when you're looking at knobs, these are important to make sure that they turn both directions easily. They're not over tightened, okay? And they're not stripped. Super easy check.
The way to tell if they're stripped, once the jump board's in and you tighten it and they don't stop and they just keep rotating, that's a sign the knob needs to be replaced.
So you don't want to over tighten it because that will just
Yes,
throw it all off.
every time.
Okay. Here we go, here we go. I'm going down the list.
How about some non-skid?
Non-skid.
There's one we should
Thanks,
talk
Joe.
about. Well, non-skid's a pretty important part because we want to keep our foot on there when we're doing some standing exercises. What will happen over time is the edges can start curling up, and it makes it uncomfortable on your feet. You're standing there and you got a curled up edge. Pretty easy to replace, peels off, stick a new one down, and it keeps your equipment looking much nicer.
All right, I think we're ready to move on to the carriage.
Okay?
Okay, so the main safety thing at the carriage, we talked about earlier, the springs.
Correct.
Checking the springs. Now, it's also important to note that underneath, you have one open end of your spring. So you want to make sure that when it's resting, the hook opens down. And not up. Okay, we're going to show you a nice close-up underneath the carriage later.
I'm ready to go.
We're going to do it while the carriage is in place so that you can see the correct orientation
Okay.
and not have to like flip your brain around. Okay?
Okay.
All right. We talked a little bit about the surface of the rails and the wheels. That's really important. So we keep the ride feeling nice and smooth. Okay, it really takes away from the experience of Pilates.
That's right.
If your carriage is like thunk, thunk, thunk. Okay. And then we're also checking for side wheel adjustment. On these wooden reformers, we want to make sure that there's not too much side-to-side play. There can be some, that's totally fine. That's why we have side wheels.
But, you know, if there's too much, one of the issues you can run into is when you're adjusting your Revo spring bar and the carriage has a lot of side-to-side play up here and the carriage is pulled one way, it tries to actually drag the spring bar unevenly and it gets caught up in the frame.
Yep. So if you think your side wheels are not adjusted correctly, you can check out the BB Garage for some other videos on how to adjust them. Okay. Moving up the carriage, we want to make sure that the headrest is secured to the carriage,
Nice and
that the
tight.
bolts are not loose or the screws are not loose. Okay.
Also, the elevation block is still attached and
Yes.
not falling off someplace.
Yes. We want to make sure the ropes go through both of the eye straps, okay, and securely through the cam cleats.
And when you say securely, you're meaning pushed all the way down and both cleats pressing up against it.
Right. We don't want to see one cam cleat out here and one here. They should be
Equal.
like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we talk about tightening bolts, the two bolts that hold the cleat in place, you don't want to tighten those. Those are set here at the factory. Now, if the whole cleat itself is loose, you do want to snug them down a little bit, but by over tightening these, it'll stop them from being spring loaded. They'll lock up and then the ropes will slip.
Yep. So the other thing I see a lot in studios in which these twist lock knobs are super good for this, okay? They make it really easy to quickly loosen your shoulder rests, swap them,
yeah.
or take them off to put your mat conversions on. But on older machines, sometimes you'll see either a lockdown kit,
Which let's explain a lockdown kit. You'll see a bolt head on top and there's a knob on the bottom. Doesn't mean the shoulders are not removable, it just means you have to remove the knob and the bolts to take the shoulder rest off.
yes, it keeps it from rattling. But if you often take them off and on, if you were on a tower, you might have a quick release pin. So it's really important that when you do use this as a reformer, you put the pin in the
Correct.
hole, right? It's not there because it's
Just-
optional. It's for
a
safety reasons you need
for
the
sure.
pin in there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
With the twist lock, we've redesigned this so it's nice and easy to remove the shoulder rest and slide them back in. One of the issues we do see though, the one end is not in proper place and people slide them in and it gets hung up. So you just want to make sure they're nice and
Make
smooth.
sure they're flush.
And just
Yep.
quick tighten down and ready to go.
Yep. Now, if we move up to the ropes and the loops, we want to check to make sure that there's no frayed edges, frayed stitching, anything that's like fuzzy and worn and looks like, hey, this isn't very strong anymore.
Yeah, because you'll see lumps and bumps on the ropes and you'll start feeling out when you're doing arm work or leg work using the ropes.
Yep.
Another part on the ropes, you'll see there's this plastic material. A lot of people have a tendency to shorten up the ropes by grabbing this and so they can do their next exercise. Over time, this can come loose. Balance Body does carry replacements for that if necessary, but some people tend to go without it. It's just to cover the stitching up that's on there.
Not a big deal.
Do we have? I thought we had a loop with some stitching.
We don't.
Oh, okay.
I know. Maybe Scott will show a little picture.
Okay. So, but yeah, definitely want to make sure your ropes are nice and smooth. If you feel lumps in them, or another thing to really look for is if you see the outer casing is starting to wear and you can see the inner material, it's definitely time to change your ropes.
Yep. Yep. Now the ropes go up and through these pulleys here. Okay, so these pulleys are really awesome. They're very smooth. But there are a few things we need to check for safety here. So the first is the bolt that goes through the clevis.
The clevis is the
Okay.
U-shaped piece that goes through the eye bolt. You want to make sure there's a flathead screw right here. You want to make sure that stays tight. Quick way to stick a flathead screwdriver in there and just give it a slight twist. If it's tight, it's good to go.
Yep. I've
Do that on-
seen them where the bolt has actually come out of the threads. It's still in there, so the pulley doesn't go anywhere. But if you rattle it, or if you're doing big leg circles, it can come out. So you want to make sure that that bolt is through both ends
Yep,
of the clevis, or
clevis,
the
U-shaped.
U-shaped piece.
that's correct.
Right?
The other piece we want to make sure of is the eye bolt is securely tightened into the receiver, or the riser, I should say. These are put together here at the factory with some very strong thread glue, as we'll call it. But I have seen over time they come loose after many years of use. If that does occur, please call technical support at Balanced Body.
Yep. The other thing with your eye bolt is that the pulley clevis will wear the inside edge of the eye bolt. So we actually have an example over here. And there are two things that make this really annoying. One, it thins out the material, so it could be a little weaker.
Correct.
And two, it creates a super loud clunk every time you do a leg
Every
circle.
time it rotates past it, it
Yep.
catches on it.
Yep. So this is type of wear that you would want to watch out for and replace either the eye bolt or the whole pulley assembly when you notice this wear. Okay. So we've talked about these. These are metal risers. The same thing applies to the wood risers. Okay. So the same thing with the clevis bolt, the same thing with the eye bolt wear. What's really important about these knobs, Joe?
Well, number one, don't over tighten them.
Yes.
What I run into a lot is people have taken and with all their might, tightened it down. All that does is wear out the inner threaded part of the knob, and over time, by keep doing that, the knob will not cinch down, and you'll find that the pulley starts sliding down on the riser itself.
Yes. So we don't want to over tighten this black knob back here. Okay. The other thing about your wood risers, we want to make sure that they are secure to the frame. So if you give a little wiggle up here, you should not hear them rattle or feel them move. That's when you need to take a little Allen wrench and tighten the 4 bolts on the back. Now this is a great example of Joe's don't over tighten principle because there are no washers
Correct.
on these bolts.
And as you keep over tightening it, it starts digging into the wood, and eventually could split the wood if you over tighten it too far.
So that don't over tighten, snug it up. Okay. Shifting back to the risers over here on this tower, we want to check the riser receivers. Okay. So the riser receivers, Joe, let's work on that one in the back corner over there. The riser receivers are attached to the frame and to the tower bracket on the back. So there's some bolts there that you want to make sure are tight and secure.
Yeah, there's 3 on each one. We want to make
3
sure.
on
it's-
each riser.
Something else we want to make sure of is a pin still here, along with the lanyard.
Yes. The plastic lanyards are super easy to replace. Sometimes they break.
Yep.
Really easy. Okay.
You want to make sure you get it all the way in. I've seen people where they won't push it all the way in and engage into the wood,
Yep.
and that pin can vibrate its way out, and then your riser will drop in use.
Yep.
Don't want to have that happen.
Nope. Certainly do not want that to happen. If we transition to the back, so we're looking at the tower bracket and then working our way up the tower. We're again looking at the bolts that hold the bracket to the wooden frame, making sure they're secure. There are a couple other screws back here
Yep.
that are
Sets-
important.
Set screws. And with the set screws, they're the ones on the receiving couplers down here.
Yep.
There's 2 on either side. Plus, there's also some set screws up on top. We want to make sure those are nice and secure, but not over tightened. Your tower should could have a little bit of wiggle. That's just normal flex in the actual tower itself, but you don't want them to where they can twist and rotate and lift out.
No twisting, no rotating, no lifting out, no big rattling.
Yes,
Right,
big
no
rattling.
metal on metal rattling, okay? We're gonna check all the eye bolts on your tower. Fingers, right? If your fingers can move them, they need to be tightened.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just go through
Now, T-pins. This happens to be a super awesome
New
sliding push-through bar.
Yep.
Okay, easy to adjust up and down. So for this design, we want to check that these bolts here on the inside
Yeah.
are not loose.
And also
Okay.
the knobs on the outside.
Also the knobs on the outside. Good. If you have an older machine that has T-pins, there are a couple things you want to look for in a T-pin. Okay, so
This
the
is what we
first
call
thing,
T-pin.
this one happens to be missing something.
Well, there's two little balls that when you push the pin or the button on the pin inward, the two balls will go in. Then you're able to release the T-pin from the push-to bar. What we run into is over time, well, the balls might fall out, or both, and both can happen. So at that point, T-pin is not going to keep your push-to bar secure. You do need to replace it. What's the other thing?
The other thing happens if you notice on your T-pins some pretty deep grooves getting worn into the actual metal shaft,
Yes.
right? So what's causing that?
Well, that's caused by the vertical tube rotation. These tubes, when you put them in, actually you drop them in, you have your push-through bar on, you just tighten the set screws. There is a chance that this tube could be slightly out of rotation, and the sides of the holes in the tube will start wearing on your pin through use.
Yep.
Quick and easy adjustment, loosen the set screw here, two down below, slightly rotate the tube, tighten it back down. Once it's tightened down, make sure the pin pulls out and goes back in, real nice and easy.
Yep.
Very important.
Whenever you're making adjustments to your tower, you always want to go with the check of, does my push-through bar swing quietly and easily, okay? Sometimes you'll hear this, right?
Yep.
Some 3-in-1 oil will make that go away right away, and we have some other videos on that, okay?
But if the vertical tubes are out of rotation, doesn't matter how much oil you use, it's still gonna squeak.
Yes, yes. Okay. Same safety principles apply for the tower springs that we've already talked about. Checking the clips, checking the coils of the spring.
Correct.
Right? You also want to check the eye bolts to make sure they aren't opening up.
Yep.
Okay.
Right there.
And then up here at the top, we want to just do a quick check on your safety strap to make sure that it's
Yes.
around the pole and
Nice.
not hanging from an eye bolt. The pole is much stronger than an eye bolt, so that's the
Correct.
safe place for it to be.
Correct.
Okay?
Most important to have the safety strap.
Okay. So before we finish, we need to talk about the mat
Mat
conversion,
conversion,
right?
Yeah, let me move this
So
for you.
Move it forward, give it a little rotate, and bring it up here so they can see it.
There we go.
Yeah. So we're looking at the flaps here. These are on one end of your one half of your mat conversion set. Okay.
Yep, this would go on the tower end. It's for protection. When the springs would rub up against the vinyl, we prefer the vinyl, or the springs rub up against the vinyl flaps, not against the actual vinyl of the pad, so they don't wear out. So you want to make sure there's space over. A couple fingers, 2 to 3 fingers worth space away from the feet is about the right position. From there, also you want to make sure that these feet have not gotten loose. Make sure they stay tight, nice and tight.
Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If they're uneven, sometimes your mat conversion won't sit flush on the frame, so check all your feet. Okay?
Yep,
All right, so I think that's it.
yeah,
All
sounds
right.
good.
So if you need more videos like this one, you can go to pilates.com/bbgarage. We'll see you there.